I want you to take a second and really think back. Maybe you were the kid who just couldn't sit still, you know? The one whose energy seemed to literally spill over the edges of the classroom. Or maybe you were the exact opposite. Maybe you were the one who sat perfectly still but wasn't really there at all, staring out the window, lost inside some incredibly complex thought that nobody else could possibly follow. Daydreaming your way through entire conversations, nodding your head like you were totally present, while your mind was oceans away. For so many of us, this is exactly where the story begins. Not with a medical diagnosis, but with this profound, heavy sense of just being completely out of sync with the rest of the world.
And because of that disconnect, you were handed a story about yourself. As we go through these, I want you to quietly collect the ones that were assigned to you. You were called lazy, distracted, too sensitive, too much, not enough, and perhaps the absolute heaviest burden of them all, smart but unfocused, full of potential you never quite seemed to reach. For years, maybe literally decades, you carried those words around. You internalized them. You believed them. You basically built your entire self-image around the idea that you were fundamentally falling short.
But what if it was never a character flaw? What if your brain was just built differently, and simply, nobody thought to tell you?
Okay, let's really dive into this explainer, because there's this quiet wave happening right now all over the globe. Adults in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond are sitting in a doctor's office or reading an article or maybe even going through an explainer just like this one and suddenly feeling something they have never quite felt before, recognition. And I don't mean a vague, oh, that sounds familiar kind of feeling. I mean a specific cellular level recognition, the kind where someone describes exactly how your mind works and your very first thought is, wait, that's a thing? That actually has a name? Adult ADHD diagnoses have totally surged recently. And the majority of people getting them aren't kids. They're adults who have spent their entire lives developing these totally exhausting workarounds for a brain the world never accommodated. They look incredibly high-functioning on the outside, but they are completely exhausted on the inside.
We really need to understand why so many people went undiagnosed for so long. For decades, the medical picture of ADHD was just incredibly narrow. You had this outdated stereotype: a young boy, can't sit still, disruptive in class, visibly hyperactive. And sure, while that is a valid presentation for some, that picture left out almost everyone else. It left out girls who were far more likely to internalize their symptoms, becoming anxious, perfectionistic, and just quietly overwhelmed rather than visibly disruptive. It left out the high achievers, whose sheer intelligence masked their struggles, compensating so well that literally nobody noticed the immense internal cost. And it left out adults entirely, because ADHD was widely treated as a childhood condition that you somehow just grew out of. But here's the hidden reality. They didn't grow out of it. They just got much better at hiding it. And this completely reframes what we think we know. Let's clear something up right here and now. ADHD is not an attention deficit. Honestly, that name has always been so misleading. People with ADHD do not lack attention. What they lack is consistent control over where their attention actually goes. This isn't laziness, it isn't being willful. The absolutely crucial point here is that this is about dopamine regulation. It's the brain's reward and motivation system functioning differently. Tasks that feel inherently rewarding, boom, they get full engagement. Tasks that do not feel rewarding, they feel almost physically impossible to start, completely regardless of how objectively important they actually are. Which creates what we call the focus gap. Think about the frantic, cluttered reality of a simple 5-minute admin task, an email, a really basic form to fill out. For an ADHD brain, starting this unrewarding task can literally feel like trying to push a giant boulder up a hill. It feels physically impossible. The gap between knowing you need to do something and being able to actually make yourself do it is quietly devastating. But then, look at the other side. When something captures genuine interest, curiosity, or urgency, the ADHD brain doesn't just focus, it hyper-focuses. It finds this absolute calm of deep creative flow. Hours just disappear. Everything else completely falls away. The exact same brain that cannot process a 5-minute admin task can lose itself in a creative project for 6 hours straight. But living in that gap, trying to force a uniquely wired brain to operate in a totally standardized world, hiding it, costs something. It takes a profound toll to constantly maintain that mask. It's like being an exhausted person desperately paddling under the water, just trying to appear completely fine and normal to society above the surface. And that invisible toll brings us to the exhaustion that nobody really talks about. There is a very specific kind of tired that comes from spending your whole life working 3 times as hard as everyone else just to appear equally capable.
It's the exhaustion of building these elaborate systems to manage a brain that literally resists systems, setting 17 different reminders for one single task, rereading the exact same paragraph 4 times and retaining absolutely nothing. Walking into a room and completely forgetting why you're even there. Starting 10 things, finishing none of them, and quietly hating yourself for it every single time. And then there is the social exhaustion, the relentless performance of neurotypicality. Laughing along when you completely miss the thread of the conversation 20 seconds ago. Looking super engaged when your mind is somewhere else entirely. That exhaustion is deeply real. And for so many, getting a late diagnosis doesn't just explain their lifelong struggles, it finally explains the tiredness, that bone-deep, years-long tiredness that a good night's sleep just never quite fixes.
So why right now? Why are so many people suddenly being diagnosed as adults? Well, it's a convergence of 3 main things. First, clinical awareness has finally expanded to include women, girls, and adults who just present differently. Second, we found shared experiences. Online communities have allowed people to describe their internal lives in ways that finally resonate with others who honestly thought they were totally alone. But the third reason is probably the biggest one: our modern world. Think about the infinite scroll, the constant notifications, the relentless demand for sustained but fragmented attention. Environments that once allowed people with ADHD to quietly compensate now demand a level of consistency that this brain genuinely struggles to sustain. The world simply got way more demanding, the mask got way too hard to wear, and so more people finally just stopped wearing it.
And when that mask finally does come off and an adult receives that late diagnosis, it almost always arrives with 2 very distinct feelings: relief and grief, both at the exact same time. This is really the core of the entire experience. Relief because there's finally a name for it, a reason, something that reframes the entire narrative of your life from "I am broken" to "my brain simply works differently." But right alongside that relief, there is grief. Grief for everything that came before the diagnosis. The years of being told you just weren't trying hard enough. The relationships that were strained by forgetfulness that felt to everyone else like carelessness. The missed opportunities. The version of yourself you might have been if you had just had the right support from the very beginning. Both of these feelings are entirely valid. They both make complete sense. And just sitting with both of them at once, that is where the real healing actually begins.
Which brings us to what I really want you to take away from this explainer today. If you have spent your entire life feeling like you were failing at something that everyone else seemed to find so effortless and easy, please hear this. You are not lazy, you are not broken, you are not failing to try, you were simply wired differently. You were trying harder than most people will ever understand, with a brain that the world spent decades refusing to accommodate. It is not too late to finally understand why. You can absolutely put the burden down now, but it does leave us with one final, pretty vital question. Now that you know how your brain actually works, what are you going to build with it?
I want